Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis. We're doing a TV draft, Landis, because TV owns the sport, so we're leaning into it.
Yeah, just to be clear, we're drafting college football games, not television shows, right?
Are you serious? All right. I'm going to have to readjust. I had How I Met Your Mother number 1. Curb Your Enthusiasm in the top 5. Okay. All right. Well, I'll get it sorted out before we get to that.
Okay.
We're going to be like TV executives because the Big Ten last week had its TV draft, which is now more complicated than ever because this is the year where CBS is fully invested in the Big Ten. You've got an NBC package. You have the existing Fox package. So all those networks then get in there based on how much they paid for the rights. And they say, our network has the first pick. We want this game. Our network's picking now. We want this game. And they've started to release some of the games. So we know probably like where some of the picks were. Guess what? Fox took Ohio State, Michigan number 1, which they will do now for perpetuity. So that game is at noon on Fox. We don't have, everybody knows that. They did it as a news release. And the news release will be the day when Ohio State, Michigan is not at noon, when it's in prime time. And then people will be holding a vigil at Ohio Stadium that they dare move the game.
Yeah, I don't want to be around for that day when it happens.
Yeah. There are also people who think it should have happened 10 years ago. So we can get into that a little bit in the TV draft. So we're going to draft the top 20 TV games in the North this year. We're going to act like we're TV executives. We're not going to exactly follow all the rules, but I do want to get into some things because we had an absolute phenomenon happen in the North last year with the particular team. I want to talk about who could be Northern teams this year that capture the imagination when it comes to TV ratings, because I think there are a couple out there that maybe could jump compared to what those teams did in past ratings. Do you have that in mind?
I did have that in mind. Yeah. I tried to use that as a strategy when creating my big board of television games to pick from. Yeah.
I went through. So we're going to draft 20 total. I pulled out 49 Northern games that are contenders for the draft. So like that's a good schedule. So we're going to do that.
I probably have like 40. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't like you got to 11 and we're like, So this is a little different. We did something a couple months ago. We did the ultimate Northern road trip, but that we had to pick only one game each week, and we were trying to hit different Northern teams. So this is not our favorite games, the most interesting games, the most important games. I think there is value here as TV controls / destroys college football. There is some value in thinking like them, even if there are some Northern fan bases that this will only continue to make them mad, because there are going to be some teams this year that we think are going to be great Northern teams that probably aren't getting picked in our draft, which is why those fan bases want to march to Los Angeles and burn down buildings, because why is TV the thing that matters? We're all doing this one time a year. We're going to lean into TV one time a year. The rest of the time, it's ball.
I found myself getting angry at television when I was like, I can't pick this game in this draft, but this game is going to be great. So I get it. I'm going to be with you marching in LA.
Yeah. No, that'll be good. It'll be a good march. /5K run. The Kings of the North march on TV headquarters /5K run. I also just want to tell people that I was Googleizing this week, and I did find a boat company where I asked for a price request and itinerary for you and I and our great producer, Mike, to take a boat from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati in week 2 of the college football season for that Pitt at Cincinnati game that we have deemed the game we would want to go to in week 2 on our Northern road trip. I found that some people thought it's about a 14 to 16 hour boat trip to go that far. I was glad it wasn't like a week, but I don't know that we would broadcast live the whole time, but I think we get a couple shows out of it and then do like some YouTube shorts and stuff. But we're definitely up for that if the price is right.
That's a lot of time on a boat on a river.
And I would have
probably not a whole lot to see.
I think our price range for that is within like rowboat territory, probably. It might be like all three of us.
We're in a
So
canoe,
guys,
yeah.
what do you think of this Iowa State Iowa game this week? Row. But maybe we'll capture the imagination of some folks. So we'll keep you posted on the boat price. Also, if you have a boat,
oh, now you're talking.
As a viewer or listener of Kings of the North, and you could A, get the boat to Pittsburgh, B, the boat could fit Bill, me, and Mike, C, you would be willing to take us, be the captain, to take us from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati, give us a shout. Find us.
Yeah.
Find us on Twitter. We can work something out, right?
Yeah, we could just build a raft out of logs, maybe.
Like Castaway?
Yeah.
Like we're stranded in Pittsburgh. Oh, we have to get to Cincinnati. What could we do? I will not get in a kayak because I don't want my legs to be covered. And I'm pretty sure that if I was in a kayak, I would flip upside down, be unable to get myself out of the boat and drown.
Yeah.
So if it's a kayak, I'm out.
Not a kayak guy. I'm out on that too.
Okay. So as always, big things happening here in Kings of the North. We're going to start, though, before our TV draft, we're going to start with our Frantic 14 that we haven't done in a while. It's 7 Northern college football topics in 14 minutes, 2 minutes each. So let's get started with the Frantic 14. Number 1 is the Indiana Hoosiers making moves, Landis. Two things happening here. They got CJ West, the Kent State defensive lineman, out of the portal when a lot of other teams wanted him. Nicely done by Curt Cignetti and the staff. And by the way, the number 1 quarterback in the next recruiting class is coming to Bloomington. What's up, Curt?
It's a pretty strong endorsement, right, of what Coach Siggs has going on out there. I think with Julian Lewis deciding he's going to take a official visit on May 31st, so it's coming up soon. The number 2 quarterback in the country in the class of 2025, top 10 prospect overall. I think maybe at one point was the number 1 quarterback. It's gone back and forth, I think, between he and Bryce Underwood, who is from Michigan and committed to LSU. So now we have Julian Lewis, who is from Georgia, at least entertaining the idea of perhaps coming north to play at Indiana. So that's pretty cool. Like, I don't want to pretend like Indiana's going to get Julian Lewis, right? It's going to be pretty stiff competition. But even if they don't, like, I don't even think it's about whether or not they're going to get him. I think it's about a player of Julian Lewis's stature and recruiting profile deciding to use one of his 5 official visits to go visit Indiana with Curt Cignetti. Like, I think that that is a rather strong endorsement of what they have going on in Bloomington.
Like, already a win. I agree with you. Do we know why? What did Indiana do to get his interest? Something like this.
I don't know why. That there's, as far as I know, there's like no obvious connections. I know, like, I've said this before, right? They do have a pretty good track record with quarterbacks. Their quarterbacks win Conference Player of the Year, which, like, if you can kind of extrapolate that and move it to the Power 4 level, it's like, oh, maybe Indiana is a place that can start developing NFL quarterbacks. So that's probably enticing, and it does seem like Curt Cignetti and Tino Sinceri, their quarterbacks coach, are pretty good about selling what they're able to do. So I don't know if there's anything to it more than that, but I know that those two guys together have a lot to offer as quarterback developers.
You got to start somewhere, right? You got to. This is how juice is made. You're squeezing the juice.
That's right.
And just to get a little Julian Lewis in there, it doesn't have to be. It's not just Julian Lewis juice, but it's like when you get a good mix, a good citrus mix, and there's 3 or 4 different flavors. Just to have a little flavor of a 5-star quarterback coming on campus for one of his 5 officials. Well done by the Indiana Hoosiers. We'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Right down the road, West Lafayette. Another move that is going to be impactful right now. Our number 2 Frantic is them adding a great defensive back maybe a year early, Landis?
Yeah, so this is an interesting story. I believe I have the details of this right. Ryan Grant, who was Purdue's top commit in the 2025 class, is now reclassifying to join Purdue now for the 2024 season. He'll be on the roster this fall. He'll arrive sometime this summer. And I think the situation is he was initially 2024, or at least by age, he should be in the class of 2024. He reclassified to 2025. Turns out he doesn't have high school eligibility left after this year. He could have gone to prep school. He could have just trained for a year before joining Purdue. But instead, he's just going to join Purdue. He's back in the class of 2024. Some sites had him as a 5-star prospect. Now that he is reclassified in the 24/7 Sports Composite, he is a top 100 player. He is the number 10 cornerback. Like, this is a heck of a prospect that Purdue is adding to its secondary, and they're trying to retool that a little bit, right? We've talked about some of the transfer additions they made, and Ryan Grant is big. He's 6'2". He's got great speed. He's a sub 11 100-meter guy in track and field. So like, this is a really good, big athlete that Purdue is adding to its secondary. And at the very least, I think like raising the floor of a position group that was not particularly good for the Boilermakers and Ryan Walters' first year. So this is a huge addition for Purdue.
And they had already added a couple secondary guys in the portal.
Mm-hmm.
Nyland Green from Georgia is going to start at Purdue this year. And you think about, Ryan Walters as a defensive coach. They had Devin Witherspoon at Illinois, was a top 5 pick as a corner. Like, I like anything that leans into Purdue establishing this defensive identity, which is why Ryan Walters got the Purdue job in the first place. So in year 2, to be building like this is, I think, a very good sign.
Yeah, and some teams were trying to poach to Ryan Grant as well. Like, I think that was maybe the thing that Purdue, was fearful of, was like, if he was out there for that year, kind of not doing anything, teams might have been able to take him away. And then, like, he had visited Michigan, Alabama was there, Indiana had actually offered him after he committed to Purdue, Florida State was after him. He's from Tennessee, so like he was definitely going to get SEC interest. So instead of now being exposed to all of that, he's just going to go to Purdue immediately.
And with the way the portal works, I don't know. Like, to me, if you bring this guy on campus, you might have to find a way to get him in some games. Mm-hmm. Because to have him on campus, be like, hey, I came here, I covered 2 punts. What am I doing? And you got to keep the Wolves away, right? So get this guy some action. So you could see Grant on the field this year for Purdue. So again, you like what Purdue's doing. All right, third thing up is, this is not super fresh. This happened last week, but we just need to talk about coaches being unable to speak about NIL. And it happened with Spencer Danielson at Boise State, which that counts in the North for us. And then Brian Kelly, former son of the North at LSU. They both just said some goofy things about NIL that didn't help them. And I think they maybe wound up trying to clarify. But what did you think of like what they said and why they said it? Why is this happening still?
I guess it's just like, I don't know. Is it it's inability to adapt maybe, or being fearful of something and trying to get out in front of it, which I almost understand for Boise State and Spencer Danielson. I don't really understand it at all for Brian Kelly and LSU. Like, to me, it was like another example of Brian Kelly, like, being a little bit out of touch with where he is. Like, you're at LSU, brother. Like, you don't go out there and say, we're selling something different. You're selling money. You're LSU. Yeah. If you got to buy players, you're buying players. And especially doing it like on the heels, because it seemed like that was a direct response to CJ West, we mentioned earlier, picking Indiana over LSU and a couple other schools. It's like, you're going to go in front of a microphone and cry poor because you lost a recruit to Indiana and you're LSU. Like, that's not it, man. So they got to figure that out. Like the Boise State thing, I think, was more of a misunderstanding than anything else. Because
Spencer Danielson said they aren't going to pay first-year players NIL, right?
Yeah, which was, I think, initially taken as like, Boise State's not giving any money to its freshmen. It's like, well, they can't block them. That's illegal. What he was saying was their collectives aren't going to break the bank to like buy a recruiting class because they're not really built to do that, which I think makes sense for a place like Boise State. I think you're probably better off using your resources to try to retain your roster once guys are there and have done some things, rather than pay a recruiting class. But like, a kid who signs with Boise State can still go get a deal with Albertsons, the grocery store, right? They're not stopping them from doing that. It was just I think something got crossed up there in the delivery. But I don't think it's actually like as bad as people made that one out to be.
I think in the end, it's just when stuff like this gets out, it just makes it seem like the coaches don't know what they're doing with the evolving modern world, which does not serve them. It does not serve the program. It does not serve them. It does not make them look old school and tough. It does not make them look like they're doing it the right way. It just makes them look out of touch. So if I was an AD, I would just tell my coach, if you can't speak intelligently about NIL, don't speak about it. We've got it. You got the collective guy over here will handle it, but don't try to be a hero to hold on to a past that is gone, because nobody needs you to be a hero there, brother. It's all good.
Right. Yeah, right.
Okay, the next thing up is our 1-star review, which we are not afraid to talk about here, and it happens, and it's because of me. Which is, if you review our reviews, these are on Apple Podcasts. You can always drop a thumbs up or a comment on the YouTube channel. We appreciate any and all feedback. I will say, for the most part, if there is a negative review or comment about a show that I am a part of, it is about me. Everybody loves you. Everybody loves you. I, in my best circumstances, have frequently been called an acquired taste. And in the process of that acquisition, 1-star reviews are part of the deal. So here's what happened. This is from Sam 2U8E4L. Seriously, get off Deion's jock. This is about Colorado and Deion Sanders. This is a college football pod, and every episode has a random 20-minute section where Doug tries to gaslight himself about Colorado being good because of some random celebrity that shows up on campus. We're college football fans, so if you're going to talk about Colorado, talk about their football team and not some concert they had on campus because Deion knows celebrities. Enough of the sizzle talk. Deion isn't putting on the pads on Saturdays. Stop acting like it. Do you agree with that?
No,
You're allowed to.
I don't.
You're also
I don't,
allowed to do your own reviews of this show, and if you think I'm saying things that are
no, I don't 100% agree with it. I think we at times we have probably talked a little too much about Deion and the sizzle and not enough about the football. I think that's probably true of everybody who talks about Colorado. Well, not everybody, because Deion does have his detractors, but most people who talk about Colorado, like, I think that's fair. I also like the sentence gaslighting. I like the turn of phrase gaslighting yourself. It's good.
Yeah.
I
may burst into flame one day on this show. I'm gaslighting myself so hard. So be aware. I think we definitely talk about sizzle versus substance. My main point with that has been it's better than where they were. Even if they stink, they stink while they get attention as opposed to being totally irrelevant. I also will say there is something that we have planned related to Colorado football that has nothing to do with Deion Sanders that will give us a window into Colorado football in an incredibly interesting way that you should see coming on this feed in the next couple months or so. So I would like to talk about, and we will. It's like, oh, if only we could. It's our show. We can do whatever we want. We will talk about Colorado all substance football. But the hard part, as we get ready to do a TV draft, we're going to take a bunch of Colorado games, even though they're going to go 4-8 again, because sizzle sells. Sorry to our review. You might have to drop one more 5-star review, more 1-star review based off the discussion we're about to have about Colorado being a team that people love to put on TV. So if you want to do a 5-star review, we might read that too. But we're not afraid of 1-star. We are afraid of them. They hurt my heart. They make me cry myself to sleep at night. That's one of those things. I believe in a world where if someone wrongs you, you say something back to them that is true and hurtful and makes them look at the ceiling and cry themselves to sleep at night because they know the thing that you said out loud is the thing that they themselves in their heart and soul, it bothers them most about themselves. That's how if someone cuts me off in the pickup line at school, that's a thing that I would say to a person to try to make a parent think about that. Like, you're a terrible parent, like in a specific way.
You're just giving out 1-star reviews in person.
Yeah.
Your everyday life.
Like, very specific. Because like general criticism doesn't land on people. If you get specific about a thing they know they're not good at.
Yeah.
I don't do it all the time. Just when it's called for. Okay. Right. So I also reposted a thing on my personal Instagram and Twitter the other day, but it was an 11-year-old Facebook post I had about how I know in my heart I'm capable of murder. And my daughter was like, that was pretty intense, Dad. And I thought it was like a funny, lighthearted thing to post. Hey, I'm capable of murder. And I'm not sure everybody took it that way. So
that's a good thing to know about yourself, though, right? Like, you need to know that about yourself.
Now, if someone gave a 1-star review that was like, Doug, I think you're capable of murder, I'd be like, absolutely. Kansas to the SEC. I don't even know where this came from. It was like a little bit of a chatter of a report of a whatever. But it struck a chord with me because I think we're taking Kansas north. It snows there. Mm-hmm. I don't want Kansas to go to the SEC. So it's just chatter stage. But like, how did this hit your ear?
Yeah, I didn't like it. I will say this, like, it makes sense to me that Kansas would be attractive to the SEC, right? Like, an incredible basketball program, one, and the SEC has become a pretty awesome basketball conference. So to add Kansas to that would be incredible for them. And like, it is a football program on the rise with a coach in Lance Leipold, who's one of the best in the sport. So like, that part of it made sense to me from the SEC side. I just don't like it from the Big 12 perspective. I think mostly, like, I kind of love what's happened with, like, I don't love it, but I think the Big 12 ended up in a really good spot with its football product after kind of all this conference realignment. Like I think it is probably the most fun football conference that we have. So like to take Kansas out of that would suck. So I hope it doesn't happen. I hope it's I don't know, maybe it's a way to like strong arm the Big 12 into being a little more competitive financially, perhaps. But I don't want Kansas leaving the Big 12 to go to the SEC.
It does feel like there's some group of schools, it's mostly Florida State and Clemson in the ACC, that are like, we got to get out and get to one of the big two. I don't know why Kansas would necessarily have to be at that stage unless every school in the country that's not in the SEC and Big Ten, if they could get to the SEC and Big Ten, they would do it. But to me, if this is where we are, then I think the Big Ten should take a look. And once upon a time, 15 years ago about Big Ten expansion, I remember like talking to people and writing about Kansas as a Big Ten candidate in a world where maybe basketball mattered more than people thought. I don't think that's true. I think it's all football, all football, all football. But especially for the Big Ten, if you get a little bit, like, I don't know, if you get the Kansas City market, or it's a little bit of a draw there. The football has gotten more interesting. And for currently a Big Ten world that does not have a blue blood basketball program, I don't know. I don't know if Kansas basketball would drive it enough to make something happen. But to me, I'd rather have Kansas. If Kansas is looking around, I'd rather have them look north than south.
For sure. No, I agree with that. I would rather them stay put. That'd be my number one preference. But if they're going to move, I'd prefer they move to the Big Ten. And I also I didn't know this about Kansas, and I wouldn't have assumed it either. But USA Today said that Kansas is number 3 in the new Big 12 and like generating revenue behind the Arizona schools. I don't know that I would have guessed that about Kansas. I guess it makes sense, but I don't know. That kind of took me for a surprise.
Yeah, take a look. Tony Petitti, take a look. All right, next up in the Frantic 14, Bill Connolly from ESPN, updating his SP Plus rankings and updating his returning production rankings specifically, which actually what matters is how much of what you did last year statistically is back this year. Now with the portal and that kind of thing, revisiting that, and just worth remembering, it's not sea changes, but some of the Northern teams that are way up there. He does them for all 134 Division I teams. I'm just looking at the Power 5, but number 1 in returning production is Iowa State. So if you're wondering why we like Iowa State, that's part of it. Number 7 in the Power 4 is Iowa. Number 10 in the Power 4 is Rutgers. 12 is Syracuse. 13 is Colorado. 15 is Minnesota. 16 is Nebraska. And I think, Bill, that list, we're intrigued. Like, we've talked a lot about how good we think almost all those teams can be. Iowa State, we like. Iowa, we like. Rutgers, we like. Syracuse, we like. Colorado, we're intrigued by. Minnesota, we think is going to be better than people think. And Nebraska, we like a lot. So we're kind of leaning in our evaluation on some of this returning production stuff. And this is a nice reminder.
Yeah, it is a nice reminder. Iowa State, by the way, moved up. They were number 2 initially. Virginia Tech was 1. So now Iowa State is 1, as you mentioned. I also saw CFB Numbers is a good Twitter account to follow. They sort of made a graph that had this new returning production data mixed with Vegas win total predictions to kind of see like, okay, you have all this returning production back, but we don't think it's good production. So like some of these teams we're talking about were like kind of in that quadrant you don't want to be in, which is you have a bunch of returning production, but your win total projection is like 4.5 for the season because nobody thinks you're any good. So like Colorado is in that bottom quadrant. Syracuse is like kind of right on the line, sort of in the middle. I think Nebraska might have been closer to the middle too. So I just want to make that point to say like it's not always a good thing that you have a bunch of production back, but it is informative, I think, when we're trying to figure out who can take a step forward this season. And when a team like Iowa State has like a pretty good season last year, like a decent season, and then returns basically everybody, like that definitely gets your antennas up. And I also think too, you didn't mention this, like when programs like Oregon and Ohio State are like in the top 50 or top 60, that's a huge deal. Like rosters a turnover as much as theirs do. And Oregon overall, including some of the G5 schools were on there, was 25th. And Ohio State was 56, which is up from 70 in the initial rankings. I think that's more about teams around them losing stuff than it was Ohio State gaining because they didn't add anybody in the second transfer portal window. But like Ohio State now being on the cusp of the top 50 with its talent level, like that to me is like kind of scary. And
I do think when you can return bad production, but I think like you talk about Syracuse, well, they returned all this, plus they added Kyle McCord, they added Fadil Diggs on defense, like they supplemented with some additions. Colorado's returning some stuff. They also completely rebuilt their offensive line. So like the thing that was the worst, if they were returning their whole offensive line, I'd be like, oh my gosh, they're returning none of it now. And they brought in completely new guys. So I do think some of those returning highly ranked returning schools are supplementing in an interesting way. And then, by the way, not that we didn't know this, the bottom two schools in the Power Four in terms of returning production are Washington and Michigan, which is just fascinating, which is why you got to get it while you can. So again, congratulations to Washington and Michigan for using what they had a year ago to get to the national championship game, but then they lost everything. Last thing is the video game, the leaked cover for EA Sports 2025 college football. We had proposed a cover a couple months ago. We'll compare our proposed cover to the actual leaked cover. Bill, what did you think of this leaked cover, which most people have seen by now? It's multiple players. It's Donovan Edwards of Michigan, Quinn Ewers of Texas, and Travis Hunter of Colorado, most prominently focused on. Plus Jalen Miller of Alabama, Carson Beck of Georgia, Quinson Judkins of Ohio State. Do you like this cover?
I like it. It's not, to be clear, like it's not the official cover. This was I think a version of the deluxe game edition that ended up in the PlayStation Store last week that I think maybe was not supposed to end up in the PlayStation Store last week, but it was there anyway. So like I think this is cool, right? I don't know. I guess on one hand, you want EA to like make a choice and like put one person on the cover. Maybe they'll end up doing that. But I do like the idea of like having college football like sort of at large represented on the cover as the game comes back and everyone is celebrating it. So I thought this was cool. The one thing I did find a little strange was that Donovan Edwards was the guy for Michigan. Like I think it makes total sense for Michigan to be prominent and central as Donovan Edwards is on this game cover because they are the defending national champs. But I don't know. I think I probably would have picked like 4 or 5 players before I got to Donovan Edwards as my choice for Michigan.
You know what makes me mad? It's like defensive football doesn't exist. That should be Will Johnson or Mason Graham for Michigan. And instead of Quinshon Judkins for Ohio State, it should be Denzel Burke or J.T. Tuimoloau or Jack Sawyer. And or Caleb Downs. It should be Caleb Downs, right? I mean, I think it does show sort of the lack of returning star power in college football that, again, a year ago, this would have been Caleb Williams on the cover of this. I think it is odd the way they did it. And then show ours, Mike. I just would have gone with Lamar Jackson from the Louisville days. That's a better cover. Like in a window where the returning star power in college football is not at the level that it often is, I would go with the most exciting, dynamic college football player since they did away with the game. You didn't get a chance to put Lamar on a cover. He would have been on a cover if they had not killed the game for however many years. But this is a guy that moves the needle. Lamar Jackson is infinitely more famous than any of the guys on the cover there. No offense to Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's an average cover because of where the sport is right now and because of EA Sports pretending that defense doesn't exist.
Average is probably fair. I think I do like the idea of like giving Lamar his due as, I mean, he would have been, it was like Michael Vick in the Madden games, right? That's what Lamar Jackson would have been in the college football games had he been in it. So like to recognize that and put him on the cover, I'd be totally fine with that. But I also understand too, like wanting to usher in a new era and make it patently clear that we are in a new era by having a current college football player on the cover of the video game. Like that would also be cool. But then then it's a question of like, who do you choose, or do you do the regional cover thing like a Phil Steele magazine, right? I think you could do that too. Maybe that could be cool, but I'd be fine with Lamar. I was also wondering too, like, because like there's a guy in a Notre Dame jersey wearing number 2, right? And is it just like, did they just put number 2 on there, or is like that actually supposed to be Jaden Harrison, who's a transfer from Marshall, who's like never played for Notre Dame? Yeah. Oh, right. Like, why is he? And like, there's a guy in a Utah jersey wearing number 0, like, which I think is Logan Fano, but I don't know. Is that just a guy in a Utah jersey who they put number 0 on? Like, I have no idea. And then there's a Washington guy. You can see the first 2 letters of his last name. It's W-I. There's only 3 guys on the roster who that could be. 2 receivers, Justice Williams and Rashid Williams, who like I don't think that would be picked, or it's Damond Williams. Or
Damond Williams Jr., backup quarterback. Let's go. I'm going to play him.
Yeah, or they just picked a couple of random letters that were visible to throw on there. So I don't know exactly what they were doing. If everything on there is supposed to be representative of a specific player, or only the guys for whom we see nameplates.
It does frustrate me. The last 3 national champions have been defense first teams, Michigan and 2 Georgia years. And Ohio State, as a favorite this year, is a defense first team.
Yep.
So it frustrates. Aren't you? I thought you would be. This is like exactly the kind of thing to frustrate you. The idea that defense doesn't exist in college football, and let's put on offensive players. I mean, no offense to Quinshon Judkins. Do people know who he is? Hey, let's get that Ole Miss guy who transferred to Ohio State just now that Ohio State fans don't really know anything about him. Let's put him on there as opposed to JT Tuimoloau, who is going to be in his 4th year of destroying opposing offenses and was a 5-star recruit.
Yeah, I mean, Quinshon Judkins is arguably the best returning running back in college football, who's now playing at Ohio State. So, like, I get that, but it's also weird. Like Ohio State fans have been wanting an Ohio State player to be on the cover of EA's college football game forever, and it's like the first guy who does it is Quinshon Judkins. But no, I thought that Donovan Edwards should have been Will Johnson or Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant. Like, pick a different.
Yeah. All right. We're just old men mad about video games. It's fine. All right. That's it. When we come back, we are going to do a draft of the 20 best TV games in the North this season. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. We're not going to tell you how to think on YouTube here. We're be glad to have your feedback. Drop a comment for the show. You can drop a review on Apple Podcasts if you're listening on pods. And again, just thanks so much for being here. I want to lay a little bit of groundwork before we draft what we think are the 20 most attractive television games in the North this season. First of all, let's talk about what were the 10 highest rated Northern games a year ago. And this is courtesy of a great site, sportsmediawatch.com. I would direct anybody there. The information is released every week, but that site aggregates it and puts it together in nice charts and has things going back 10 years. It's fantastic. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, that's a good place to find it. So the top 10 Northern games last year. Number 1, of course, and we'll talk a little more about this, was Ohio State, Michigan. More than 19 million viewers. That's almost double. And this is regular season games because and the point here is the Ohio State, Michigan game was the 3rd most watched game of the year in totality, topped only by the national championship game and I think the Alabama-Michigan semifinal. And that was it. So that's what we're talking about. But we're not including conference championship games or bowl games or playoff games in here. We're talking about regular season games because that's what we're drafting, okay? But that's how much of a monster the Ohio State-Michigan game has become. It is almost double the 2nd most watched Northern game from the regular season last year, which was Colorado at Oregon, just over 10 million. This was Deion Sanders against Dan Lanning. And when Dan Lanning saw those 10 million viewers and was like, watch this. hold my duck juice. Does it surprise you that Colorado, Oregon was number 2 on this list from a year ago, Bill?
Yeah, I was surprised to see that. I knew it was I knew it was watched by a lot of people because I remember following it on social media as it was happening, but I didn't think it quite rose to that level. That really surprised me. I thought Penn State, Ohio State certainly would have been better. Ohio State, Notre Dame would have been better. So that's pretty shocking.
Yeah, that was on ABC, and they really juiced it up. They leaned into this, and that's the thing about this is when you have a TV rating, some portion of it is how good and interesting the teams are, how big their fan bases are, but some portion of it is the time slot. What is it against? How does the network promote it? And that kind of thing matters. And sometimes, Farmageddon can be an awesome game, but if the network doesn't promote Iowa State, Kansas State the way they promote Colorado, Oregon's going to get a much better number, right? So we understand that. It is not all what the team deserves or earns. It is what the networks choose to lean into. Number 3 on the list was Ohio State, Notre Dame, just under 10 million. Just behind that was Penn State, Ohio State, just under 10 million, which again, that's not surprising. I think maybe the surprise there, a primetime game at Notre Dame early in the year, is maybe that Ohio State Notre Dame number wasn't even higher, Bill, which is kind of what you were saying.
Yeah, that to me, well, I mean, I guess it is practically 10 million, but that it wasn't over 10 is pretty those 2 fan bases too, and it was on linear television, it was on big NBC, right? It wasn't it was on cable or streaming somewhere. That is actually a surprisingly low number, I think.
All right, so Ohio State, Notre Dame 3, Penn State, Ohio State 4, Colorado State, Colorado was 5, which is bonkers. This is again
How?
just in the
It
north.
was like midnight. The game was
It was
played
at midnight,
so
but it was the 10 overtime game that by the time it
Yeah.
was over, every waking person in America was watching this game. That's the point of this, right? That this was like maybe the biggest word of mouth game last year, because this was still when
Absolutely.
this was maybe the peak of Colorado, right? Because this was their game 3 of their 3-0 start before they hit the other side of the mountain. But this was like still kind of organic, that the networks were leaning in, but there's no reason that Colorado State, Colorado should be the number 5 Northern regular season game of 2023, except Dion and crazy ball.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess, and like no competition, I guess, either at that real point.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, I think it was a 10 o'clock Eastern time kickoff, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
That's nuts. It got that number at that time.
So all you need is you get one of the 10 most famous athletes of this century and a multiple overtime game, and you can play it at 3:00 in the morning, baby, and people will watch.
It's true.
All right.
Yeah.
So Colorado State, Colorado was 5. Number 6 was Michigan, Penn State. This was the game where Michigan did not throw the ball in the second half, and people were just like, give me more of that. Oh, yeah. So that was 9.16 million. 7 was Nebraska at Colorado. Again, this is like, okay, here we go. 8 was Colorado TCU, which was that opener, which was like the arrival. They upset the team that had played in the national championship game. And again, this was the number, that TCU Colorado number is the number that made all the networks say, oh, let's put Colorado on every week because this is something.
Yeah. And even like the game below this one, the USC Colorado game, like by that point was not a particularly compelling game.
Yeah.
Still, it got 7.24 million.
So that was 9th is USC Colorado. I think at that point it had reached the let's watch Dion get his butt kicked part of the Colorado story, which is there was the appealing rise and then the almost as appealing, maybe to a different group of people, the almost as appealing fall of Colorado. So the networks got him on the way up and on the way down, which will be an interesting conversation is how the networks view and how we view Colorado as a TV property this coming season. And then 10th is, I don't know, the best rivalry of like the best game, the best Oregon-Washington, the regular season Oregon-Washington game. They again played in the Pac-12 championship game, which is not eligible for this rating here, but a world where there are 5 Colorado games that outdrew the Oregon-Washington game is like, there's a difference between good football and good TV football.
That is true. I know these are all the regular season games. Did you happen to look at what the number was for the Pac-12 championship rematch between these two?
I do have it because of these wonderful rankings by Sports Media Watch. So let me grab it here very quickly because they did a wonderful chart at the end of the year that just ranked all the games. So I'll just run through real quick what were the most watched games overall of the entire year. The Michigan-Alabama Rose Bowl actually outdrew the national championship game. So the Michigan-Alabama Rose Bowl was the most watched game of last year. National championship game was number 2. Ohio State-Michigan, number 3. The Washington-Texas semifinal was 4. Alabama-Georgia and the SEC championship game was 5. Georgia-Florida State in the Orange Bowl was 6. Colorado-Oregon in the regular season was 7. Michigan-Iowa in the Big Ten championship game was 8. Ohio State-Notre Dame was 9. Penn State-Ohio State was 10. Missouri-Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl was 11. Colorado State-Colorado was 12. Washington-Oregon Pac-12 championship game was next at 9.25 million. So we're talking about 9.25 versus just over 7. So that pack, they're the juice. They added juice that people were getting more and more into. But again, why would anyone watch Michigan, Iowa more than Washington, Oregon based on the football? That's just based on branding, which again, I think Oregon is a very interesting brand conversation now for this year. Because frankly, based on the football, it should have been better.
Yeah, and also that game was Friday night by itself, I think, right?
Yes.
And Iowa, Michigan was up against, I think, the ACC championship game on Saturday night. So, yeah.
All right. So those are our top 10. And before we get into our draft, I want to have a mini conversation here about Ohio State, Michigan, because guess what? Ohio State, Michigan is going to be the number 1 pick in our draft and will be in perpetuity. And here's the point I want to make. It is an absolute monster right now, what Ohio State, Michigan has become. And for it to draw 19 million people last season and be the number 3 game of the entire year as a regular season game is bonkers. And here's the point I want to make, Bill. In 2014, the last year of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry before Jim Harbaugh, the Ohio State-Michigan game drew 8.23 million viewers. That same day, Alabama-Auburn was in prime time, which is unusual. Alabama-Auburn got 13.5 million people. So Alabama-Auburn in 2014 outdrew Ohio State-Michigan by 5 million people. So that's, I think, some indication of this is this great historic rivalry. But in a world where Ohio State was dominating, that's where it was as a TV property. In 2013, Alabama-Auburn got 13.8 million. Ohio State-Michigan got 9.5. In 2012, Ohio State-Michigan got 9.5. Alabama-Auburn got a really low number that year, but USC-Notre Dame outdrew Ohio State-Michigan in 2012. So like those are the 3 oldest years that Sports Media Watch tracks. So 12, 13, 14, Ohio State-Michigan's not even the most popular game, the most watched game on its day. By last year, it's the most popular game of the regular season and the 3rd most popular game of the entire year. Since Jim Harbaugh got to Michigan, Ohio State-Michigan has outdrawn Auburn-Alabama every year except one. In 2017, so in 2016, there was a jump. 2016, when it's a 2-3 game, Ohio State-Michigan, 16.8 million. Alabama-Auburn is 8.2 million. So it doubles it. Like the first year that Michigan's good, right? Really good with Harbaugh, Ohio State-Michigan does double Auburn-Alabama. In a world where 2 years earlier, Auburn-Alabama was beating Ohio State-Michigan. I'm going to get to a final point here. So I'll just keep saying my point. Okay. So 2015, Ohio State, Michigan slightly outdraws Auburn, Alabama. 2016, it doubles it. 2017, you're expecting like it's a different year. The Alabama Auburn game, Auburn is like in the top 10. Alabama's number 1, and Auburn beats Alabama. And so that year, that outdrew Ohio State, Michigan. That was the one time since Harbaugh got there that it happened. Since then, 13 million to 9 million, 12 million to 11 million. They didn't play in 2020. 2021, almost 16 million to 10 million. 2022, more than 17 million to 6 million. Last year, 19 million to 9 million. We are now in a world where the last 3 years, when Ohio State, Michigan was a battle of 2 of the 4 best teams in the country, they doubled Auburn, Alabama. Is that Harbaugh effect? Is that Michigan and Ohio State are both awesome effect? And should we expect that Ohio State, Michigan has a drop-off as a television property in a world where Jim Harbaugh is no longer the Michigan coach?
I don't think it's like Harbaugh specific. I think it's just Michigan's good, right? I don't. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think as long as Michigan maintains its standing under Sherrone Moore, then I think that number will more or less stay consistent, and it will be by far the most watched college football game every year. Because I'd imagine a lot of those years, like before the jump, it was Ohio State doing a ton of heavy lifting, right? But these are 2 massive fan bases. But I would understand for a while there if Michigan fans weren't exactly geeked to tune into the Ohio State Michigan game, where obviously Ohio State fans would have been, and now they both are. For different reasons, I guess, but now they both are. So as long as they're both good, or even maybe it's not even necessarily that, as long as you can expect the game to be competitive or like, not decided before it starts, which it kind of felt like for a couple of years, it was kind of leaning that way for Ohio State, then I think this number will stay consistent. I don't think it has much to do with Jim Harbaugh.
2014, Ohio State wins the national championship. They have to beat Michigan to like stay in contention to make the playoff. And that number is half of what it was last year. So the idea, so Fox took over that game in 2017. The big number in
Mm-hmm.
2016 was the last time ABC had it. And what Fox took over when Fox started saying, we're going to take that game. We have we get the first pick in the Big Ten draft, and we're going to take Ohio State, Michigan all the time. They're now double what they thought they were getting from where that was. So I just want it to be a reminder. To me, in my mind, Ohio State, Michigan has always been a gigantic television property. The monster that it has become in a world where Michigan has risen up to meet and then pass the Ohio State standard, it is unbelievable what that number is. And I'm curious. Harbaugh is such an interesting hero or villain, depending how you view him, but he's kind of a must watch. So I do think it's about Michigan being good, but I think Harbaugh is a component of it. And I will be curious where this goes. And I will be curious how now, in a world where Ohio State, Oregon, and Oregon, Michigan, and games like that could be just as important in the national scope, but it's not the rivalry. I don't know. I'm on alert for this number to drop. That's all. I'm on alert for possibly 2023 and 19 million viewers to be a peak of what that was. And I didn't go back and look to see what it was in 2006. I'll get that number for a future show. But anyway, that's not what I expected. If you had said, compare the Ohio State, Michigan TV number in 2023 to 2014, I would not have said more than double. That's not where I thought it was.
Really? Because I don't know, like 2014, like looking back, had incredibly important context, but at the time, like it wasn't built up that way.
I just thought maybe that Ohio State, Michigan was a monster. Like it didn't matter. That was one of those things that records don't matter, because that's how they talk about it within the rivalry. But I think that's how they talk about it within the two fan bases. But that's not how national people perceive it. And if you think, oh, Ohio State's going to kick Michigan's butt, or vice versa, maybe you're not that interested. But when you think it's one of the best games of the regular season and it's the most famous rivalry, now you're getting 19 million people. So anyway, woo, mama, that's a big one. All right, I'll pick first in our draft. We're going to draft 20 games. I'll take Ohio State, Michigan. And maybe we're not going to, we might come back at the end of the year and be like, whose games got the most viewers? I'm not taking this to get the 18.3 million. I'm just going to give you the more interesting second pick. But Ohio State, Michigan, it's not even worth a continued discussion. Of course, it's number one.
Yeah.
So what are you going to take number two?
I think this is pretty, I don't know. I'm going to take Ohio State, Oregon. I actually think it's not that difficult. I think Ohio State, Oregon is going to do a massive, massive number.
I agree with that. So can we talk about this? What do you think Oregon could become as a television brand in the Big Ten, where they still will have some West Coast games that are starting late, but they're also going to come east for half their, 5 games and be in a different time slot. And the TV partners are going to be very strategic for their biggest games. They already have an appeal, right, with the uniform thing and the Nike Association. What could Oregon become in terms of drawing ratings?
I think bigger than what they are now. I almost feel like whoever the best of the West Coast schools in the Big Ten is, which like I think we all believe it right now, it's certainly Oregon and probably will be for a while, could be like a bit of a mainstay, like in the traditional 3:30 CBS spot, right? Because I know like Fox is going to put them at noon sometimes. Like there will be games that kick off at 9 a.m. on the West Coast, unfortunately, but I don't think they're going to do it a lot. And it does seem like the Big Ten is less interested in the primetime slots, like the 3:30 noon 30 kick on the West Coast, like time slot on CBS feels like a little bit of a sweet spot, I think, for those really interesting matchups involving the West Coast team. So I think people who are just sort of like flipping through the channels on a Saturday, who maybe don't have an allegiance to anybody or just want to watch a football game, don't particularly care who it is, might become intimately familiar with Oregon being on their television a lot, which I think will, and it's already a pretty good brand, right? But I think there's an opportunity for a program like Oregon to like really increase its brand awareness just by being, I think, more more present on like the random college football fans feed than it has been previously.
I think Dan Lanning showed us last year with the Colorado game, like what he's ready to do in terms of branding his program. And there's a ton of substance there. He's not unaware of the sizzle, which is just smart business.
Yeah.
And they're going to have good, interesting, famous players, and they're going to put up a bunch of points, and they're going to play physical defense. I guess my question is, how close to the Colorado phenomenon of last year could Oregon get? Or is that a specific Dion-related conversation, one-star review?
I think I don't know that they're going to get to that. Like, because, well, the one thing about that is like Colorado's ratings like grossly outshined their on-field product. It's like, if Oregon's ratings grossly outshine their on-field product, then you're talking about like 25 million people watching their games, because the on-field product is going to be very good. So I don't think it's quite the same thing. And I think the Colorado phenomenon is pretty Dion specific at the moment.
Okay, so I think this is the right pick though, and I think it's the obvious pick. And I will take at number 3. I will get off of Ohio State here for a second, and I will take Texas at Michigan in week 2. And this has been a game that's already been announced. So this is an interesting conversation. Fox wants to put its big games at noon. It's the whole Big Noon brand. And so Fox announced 3 games this week: Texas at Michigan, Alabama at Wisconsin in week 3, and Ohio State, Michigan are all noon starts. Those are like their big 3. Those might have been their top 3 picks in that Big Ten draft. And they're all at noon. Fresno State, Michigan in week 1 is going to be 7:30 on NBC. And then Colorado-Nebraska in week 2 or 3 is going to be, 2. I think 2, is going to be 7:30 on NBC. So you can see, okay, that's NBC is going to have the primetime Big Ten games. CBS is going to have the 3:30 slot. And Fox wants that noon slot. Are you okay? We got one piece of feedback on Twitter of people saying, why aren't these games in prime time? These best Big Ten games, they should be in prime time. Fox is screwing it up by putting all these games at noon. What do you think? Texas, Michigan at noon, I think is going to do a huge number. But would you rather this game be at 7:30 or 8 p.m.?
No, I think it's circumstantial for me. Like this particular game, no, not necessarily. Like I like the Big House to me is not like the most raucous environment that like shows really well in a primetime game necessarily. So like I'm kind of okay with this being in the noon window. The one that got announced as a noon kick that I was really bummed about is the Alabama-Wisconsin game. Like that to me needs to be a night game at Madison. So like I get selectively upset about it. I don't get consistently upset about it. So like it would be cool if Texas Michigan was at night, but I don't know that it loses much being in the noon window. I think there are specific games that you do lose a little bit by playing them outside of the primetime window. Like Penn State's a great example of that. Like I think Penn State's biggest games have had a lot of energy sapped out of them by moving them from the night, from 8 p.m. kickoffs all the way out to a noon kickoff on Fox. So like those are the times I get upset, but not for this game. No.
Fox has brainwashed me into believing that noon is a great time for a big college football game. And I do think it fits a lot of college fans who are going to the game better. The TV audience part of it, I don't.
For these two fan bases, though, like Michigan fans are accustomed to their biggest game every year being at noon, and Texas fans are accustomed to their biggest game every year being at 11 o'clock in the morning. So like this isn't a departure for either of them.
I guess it would make sense. Well, we can save it for when the Wisconsin Alabama game gets drafted. I don't think in my heart, my gut reaction anymore is not primetime equals big game, noon somehow lessens it. That's not my initial reaction. And I do think it's because Fox brainwashed me, and there may have been a time where that was my initial reaction, because if you felt the sport moving. If Fox had not come in and taken the big part of the Big Ten TV package starting in 2017 and very proactively decided noon is our spot, if they had decided, because that's not what ABC ESPN did. ABC ESPN, if you had a big game, it was at night. If Fox had decided that same thing, I think Ohio State, Michigan would be at night by now.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Yeah.
And so I don't know that it's tradition holding it there, other than when it's actually a TV property decision that they're planting their flag at noon. So anyway, all right. Texas, Michigan at noon, week 2 is my third pick. What's your fourth pick?
I would take Ohio State at Penn State. It's a week. It's November 2nd. It's a little later than it typically is. But I think these 4 that we have picked were like the clear kind of big 4 games. And then it gets a little interesting after that. But I'll take this game. And I don't disagree with your point about like big game equals night kickoff kind of thing. But I do think this game in particular has lost something by not being at night. And I think it'll be I think it'll be a Fox noon kick, I'm assuming, because that's what it's been the last couple of years.
Well, but you just don't know where it happens in the draft. Like, this could be a CBS 3:30 too. Also, I think we have to be on. I think we have to understand in the Big Ten that's going to become a prime time, like not a prime time, but a prime game slot once again. Because in the old Big Ten TV package, the prime slots were ABC, ESPN wanted their big games at night, and Fox wanted it at noon. But now there's a third entity in that 3:30 window. So there are going to be some games that hit there. This could be one of them. But you think it's best for big games at Penn State to be at night? End of discussion.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. The white pops in the moonlight.
There's just a few. I don't think that is. I mean, it's probably generally true of college football, but I think it really only truly matters for a couple. Like Penn State's one of them. I think like LSU is another big one too. Like you need to play your best games at night in those 2 stadiums.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'm going to take, this is now where there's more discussion. I do agree that those were the big 4. I think there's more discussion here, and I am going to lean into the phenomenon of last year and what I believe could be not the same level of phenomenon, but a bit of a ratings phenomenon this year. And I'm going to take Colorado at Nebraska.
Yep.
And these are the 2 teams that the teams I'm most interested in this game on September 7th in week 2. Oregon and Nebraska are the 2 programs that I'm wondering about the most in terms of elevating themselves as ratings monsters this year. If Nebraska gets it rolling, if Dylan Raiola as a true freshman 5-star quarterback has some juice, Matt Rule in year 2, Nebraska is back. Do you think Nebraska could wake up its own fan base, but also have some national appeal as a TV draw?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is the right pick. I actually wondered, should it go higher than this? I think we're right to not have it higher than this, but yes, I think there's still enough juice with Colorado, especially early in the season. And I do think Nebraska has the opportunity to catch a lot of eyeballs this year. No, they'll be 1-0 going into this game. They play, I think, UTEP. Colorado actually plays North Dakota State, which I don't think is a layup. So they could be 0-1 going into this game in theory. But this game was a monster last year when Nebraska stunk and Colorado still had a lot of people curious about what they are. Both these teams, I think, carry a lot of curiosity with them, and now you throw in the quarterback battle between Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Raiola, and I think this game ends up being a monster, and I do think Nebraska has some legitimate upside as a TV product. Yeah.
All right, that's pick 5. What are you taking 6?
I will take. I'll take the Alabama-Wisconsin game.
Okay. How much do you believe this could be lessened by no Nick Saban?
Significantly, yeah. I think the rarity of Alabama going north will be enough to keep that number from really tanking without Nick Saban. It's almost like if this game was played in Tuscaloosa, I don't know that I'd pick it here, but I think the fact that it's being played in Madison generates enough curiosity with the general college football fan that it'll be a pretty big draw. And yes, whatever it would have been with Saban, this will be less than that, but it's also early enough in the season that people won't have fully formed opinions about what Alabama is or going to become without Nick Saban, that I think we're just kind of trained to Alabama's playing in a big spot. I'm going to watch that game.
I am fascinated by the melding of coach personality with a program, and then what happens when they are extricated.
Mm-hmm.
So we can think to ourselves that Bama's Bama. And in modern, that's because that's what they've been in this era. But we have to remember that they weren't. And there's a difference. There's how much of a drop off they're going to have in terms of success on the field. But the drop off in interest, I wonder about it. It's a similar conversation that I brought up with Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, but you can think about Penn State and Joe Paterno and Florida State and Bobby Bowden, and you can run through some things, Pete Carroll and USC, where you maybe thought it was the program, and then it turned out, I don't know, it actually kind of was the coach. The success created the interest, but I do think there's a world where even if the success is similar, and there's no way Alabama's going to have the same success, but maybe there won't be a huge drop-off. Say Bama's a playoff team, but they're not Bama. I wonder how that affects their number. Will they have a 10% fall off in their cumulative TV ratings for the year, or could they have a 30% fall off? And I think this will be a good test in week 3.
Yeah, well, if they're bad too, that also invites the people who've just been longing for Alabama to be bad to watch it Schadenfreude style. But as you were talking, I got mad at myself. There's another game I should have picked before this one.
Yeah, I'm going to pick it. I'm going to pick it next.
Yeah.
Hate watching is a real thing.
Yeah.
As we may have experienced at times here on Kings of the North. Yeah. Doesn't matter if you hate us or me. I mean me. I don't mean us. When it's people disliking the show, I'm not going to lump you in. But as long as you watched, that's fine. I'm going to take Oregon at Michigan. Is that the game?
That is not the game. No, go ahead.
Oh, so you feel good about it.
Yeah.
All right. Oregon at Michigan on November 2nd. I think it's some transitive property of we took Ohio State, Michigan number 1. We took Oregon, Ohio State number 2. We took Michigan, Texas number 3. So now we've got Oregon and Michigan still sitting here. This is Oregon coming east as opposed to Ohio State going out west. I just think these are 2 of the 3 biggest properties in the new Big Ten. And late in the year, I think they will both be in the playoff race. And I think the network that has this will be very eager to pump this up and promote this. And I think there's a lot here to grab onto. So I think this is a pretty big one. Pick 7.
It's definitely a huge game. I wonder a little bit about what will Michigan be by this point. It's in November. It's a little later in the season. Like you and I think believe that Michigan isn't going to fall off a cliff, but I suppose there's a possibility that Michigan is maybe out of the playoff picture by this point, or people aren't considering them like as a strong playoff contender by this point. So like, how does that affect things? It's still 2 massive brands and a great helmet game, so like it's going to do a nice number. But that did worry me a little bit. But that was not the game I was going to pick.
By the way, November 2nd, Ohio State at Penn State and Oregon at Michigan, both on November 2nd. That is a lovely doubleheader for however the 2 networks want to frame that up.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Pick 8 to you.
Nebraska at Ohio State.
Okay.
October.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. I think that is unbeaten Nebraska coming to Columbus to play an at worst 1-loss Ohio State team, but also very possibly an unbeaten Ohio State team that had just beaten Oregon 2 weeks prior to that. Like, this has the potential to be, at least on paper beforehand, like a banger. Like, we've seen Ohio State and Nebraska get pumped up before, and then Ohio State wins like 63-9. That would be on the table too. But I think coming into this game, if Nebraska is going to do what I think it's going to do and Ohio State beats Oregon, like, this has the potential to be like mid-season game of the year, like build that way. I don't think it would actually live up to that hype, but I think it'd be built that way.
Do you think so? We took Ohio State, Penn State 4, taking Nebraska, Ohio State 8. Is it on the table for Nebraska, Ohio State to actually draw a higher rating than Penn State, Ohio State? This is a test because I think Nebraska and Penn State are so comparable as fan bases, as historic blue bloods that have not been at that level in the modern playoff era. But if they would rise back up, the scenario you're setting up, if they're both undefeated, this might be the second biggest game in the North. It could outdraw, Ohio State, Oregon, given the size of the Nebraska fan base and the history of Nebraska. If Nebraska's back as a TV property, this could be the number 2 game.
It could be the number 2 game. Like the Ohio State, Oregon game would like give it a boost, I think, if Ohio State wins. Right. It's like there's like a symbiotic relationship there. Yeah, no, I think this could absolutely be the number 2 draw in the North. And maybe, honestly, no, maybe not all college football, but certainly in the North.
Yeah, no, there's some bangers in the South this year. Alabama and
Yeah.
Georgia play each other. Georgia and Texas play each
Georgia,
other.
Texas. Yeah.
We're
Georgia,
ignoring
Clemson
them.
play week 1, right? Yeah.
Yeah, people might be out on Dabo though. I don't know. I don't know if people want to tune into Dabo. Then
People would absolutely want to tune in to watching
I know.
Dabo get his head beaten by Georgia.
That'd be a good show. Hate watching college football. The teams you love to hate. I do want to mention a couple games that are ineligible for our draft because we said we're drafting either North versus North or where the North is the home team because then like the KOTN TV network gets that game. And we also gave special dispensation to USC and UCLA home games because they're not Northern teams, but they are Big Ten teams. So we counted that. But if it's a Northern team on the road at a Southern team, the Southern TV networks get that. So Notre Dame at Texas A&M and Boston College at Florida State were 2 games. But Boston College, Florida State, I think is the Labor Day game. They always had that ACC game on Monday night on Labor Day, which is an interesting spot. Not that I think that Bill O'Brien and Boston College are a huge TV draw, but it's an interesting window. But they're ineligible for this draft. Otherwise, I think Texas A&M Notre Dame may have made our top 20 if they were eligible, but they're not because they are on the road. Okay, so now we are up to pick 9, and I think I am going to take USC at Michigan in week 4 on September 21st. And I am curious about USC in the Big Ten as a TV property. We don't have to spend a ton of time on it. We don't count USC as one of our Northern teams, but this applies to the 4 Pac-12 teams joining the Big Ten. I just don't know what their new world is going to be like because there has been a history of very good Pac-12 football being buried on the West Coast late at night, Pac-12 after dark, but USC at Michigan, even if it's a primetime game, it's not, it could be a 10 o'clock game. So it's going to be in a good window. And I'm curious how Lincoln Riley USC in the Big Ten hits.
Is this USC's first Big Ten game?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is too.
Right.
So that'll add to it, right? You want USC's Big Ten debut is against the defending national champs on the road. Like that's huge. Yeah. This is probably if we actually go back and look at the numbers of the games we picked, this could end up being I think a very good value pick for you.
Yeah.
No,
I feel good about it. Lincoln Riley's got to do his job though, man. Like Lincoln Riley has to get back to being relevant and interesting and playing enough defense to get people to care about USC as a playoff team. So, all right. So USC Michigan is pick 9, pick 10 to you.
I think I will. I'm going to go with another USC game. I think since games at USC are eligible for this exercise, I will take Notre Dame at USC at the end of the year. That is
season finale.
Week 14 game. And that is like I don't know what USC is going to be by then, to be honest. But I am a big believer in what Notre Dame is going to be this year. So if that's like Notre Dame either trying to finish 11-1 or perhaps even 12-0. Like there are only a couple potential speed bumps for Notre Dame, I think, on this schedule. This is one of them, and I do think like an undefeated season is not a moonshot by Notre Dame by any stretch. So if this is a unbeaten Notre Dame trying to finish it off, like I think this has the chance to be a monster too. And then like whatever USC can do to hold up its end of the bargain, right? But it's a rivalry. This game has had crazy finishes before. Like this is a game that I think a lot of people just naturally watch anyway, but there could be some stakes to it this year too for Notre Dame.
No, I like that. I think that's good. All right. So that's the top 10. To recap, number 1, Michigan at Ohio State. Number 2, Ohio State at Oregon. Number 3, Texas at Michigan. Number 4, Ohio State at Penn State. Number 5, Colorado at Nebraska. Number 6, Alabama at Wisconsin. Number 7, Oregon at Michigan. Number 8, Nebraska at Ohio State. Number 9, USC at Michigan. Number 10, Notre Dame at USC. Bangers, you feel good? Feel good about the North being interesting?
I feel very good about the North being interesting. I'm looking at my list and there's games on here that we shouldn't pick, but they're going to be great games. And I'm mad about it.
We are now getting into the stage where I am starting to be tempted by games that I just think are going to be excellent football games that I really want to watch, but that I might overestimate as TV properties. So instead of doing that, I will go back to what I think is one more old reliable here, and I will take Iowa at Ohio State on October 5th.
Well, that's a good one. Yeah.
Because I think Iowa could be good. I have discussed Iowa as a possible playoff contender with a potential top 5 defense in the country, a more competent offense, and if you can get Ohio State as a TV property against a half decent opponent, that's usually a pretty good bet. And I think, Iowa could certainly be that. So if Iowa beats Iowa State in week 2, this could be another undefeated matchup in early October here in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, that's a really good pick. It was definitely on my list to pick. I think I probably would have taken it next because I do like. Even honestly, even if Iowa is like not particularly good, I still think it's a game that gets a lot of eyeballs just for Ohio State. But also, it's kind of like a classic Big Ten game that I think people will just want to watch anyway, at least for the start of it. So,
and they've played some good games. Like Iowa and Ohio State have not played a ton in recent years, but they've played some very competitive Ricky Stanzi games. So, this is 2 really good defenses. You can market it. I think you can sell this game. So, and plus you get one in the shoe. Any game in the shoe against a real Big Ten opponent is pretty appealing.
Yeah, it is.
All right, 12 to you.
I'm struggling here. I don't know.
I'm starting to lean football, man. Like I just might take the L on what the actual ratings will be and take some football.
Yeah. Like I don't want to. I also want to mix it up, right? I don't want to pick another Nebraska game necessarily. All right, if we're gonna start leaning in the ball a little bit, give me Penn State at West Virginia in week 1.
Okay. I almost took this as my last pick. I think you and I could promote this.
Yeah.
I don't know if the network that gets this game will promote it the right way, but for a week 1 game,
do we know? So like Fox was announcing some stuff. Did Fox announce its week 1 game?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I didn't see anything other than the ones that were out. So the week 1 game that's out is Fresno State at Michigan on NBC at 7:30,
which is where this game was last year. So we know it's not going to be there this year. So this game is either Fox or CBS.
But this is at West Virginia. So this is right. So, but the Big 12.
Oh, it could be.
It's not a Penn State TV game.
Yeah, that's right.
So Clemson, Georgia is also this day. But this is, I think there's a way to sell this the right way. I just think networks might need help selling Garrett Green, and we're the guys to do it. But sell this as a playoff battle. A week 1 playoff battle in coal country, right? This used to be the hotbed of college football, a talent hotbed, the history of these games. But in the modern world, as the 12-team playoff launches for the very first time, West Virginia and Penn State, 2 legitimate playoff contenders, square off to decide in the modern world who will own this part of the country.
Yeah.
Garrett Green, Drew Aller. No, we could do it. We could do it. They need some help, but it's going to be a good game, and it's going to be the game that matters.
Isn't Fox is still in the Big 12 business though, right?
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
This feels like it's going to be like week 1 big noon. No,
I think it's possible. Get to West Virginia. Get to a bunch of crazy West Virginia fans going crazy for a gigantic game. I'm there. Let's do it.
Yeah. I'm there too. I think this is It's like what does. I don't know. I'm not going to make you look it up what the Penn State West Virginia game did last year on NBC. But I understand that West Virginia doesn't have the largest fan base in the world and doesn't attract a lot of eyeballs just sort of naturally. But I think this game is going to be an absolute banger. So, and I think at a certain point, TV execs take that into account, right? Like I hope. Is it just helmets? Is there any like football discussion happening when they're picking these games? Because if there is, then I think this is a good pick.
And I do think, right? I mean, if it's a good game and then people start tuning in, right, that helps the number. Last year, Penn State, West Virginia was the 5th most popular game of week 1. It drew 3.5 million. That was behind Florida State, LSU, behind Colorado, TCU, behind Ohio State, Indiana, behind Clemson, Duke. So that's just one of the indications here. Ohio State, Indiana on CBS did 4.7 million. West Virginia, Penn State on NBC did 3.5. So Ohio State against a bad opponent but on a major network, outdrew this. But also West Virginia wasn't, people thought West Virginia was going to be bad and Neil Brown's going to get fired last year.
Right.
So the hype around West Virginia, I admire the pick. I don't know if it'll pay off. We need some network help to sell this thing, but I think it's a reasonable pick here at number 12. And I appreciate your effort because we can't just pick Ohio State versus Team X. Well, I guess we could. Is Ohio State versus Team X? Should that be the final 8 picks of this draft? It doesn't matter who the opponent is because Ohio State draws.
I mean, we could do it that way. I'm actually now looking at my list to see if I have any remaining Ohio State games. I actually don't think I do.
Yeah, because just right.
I
Okay.
mean, you could pick Ohio State, Michigan State if you want to, but I don't want to.
Right. Ratings be darned. All right. Yeah. With pick 13, I'm going to take Utah at Colorado on November 16th.
Oh,
and
nice.
I think this could hit. This is the Colorado factor, which I think still could be around. Utah certainly has a good chance to win the Big 12 or at least be in the thick of the Big 12 race at this point in the season, in the third to last week of the regular season. And this is a bit of a historic rivalry. And if Colorado has any juice left or not, you can either still have positive, let's see, I want to watch Shedeur Sanders, or you could have negative, let's watch Utah kick Deion's butt. And I think this is a decent pick here at number 13.
Yeah, I like it. It was definitely on my list. And like a lot of the remaining games that I think you pick, like kind of almost feel like crapshoots. So I think there's a recipe here for this one to be appealing for sure. I believe that Utah is going to be really good, and you sort of, again, you get both sides of the coin with Colorado. Either they're good and this game's compelling, or they're bad and everyone gets to watch Deion get beat up. So win there. Okay, that's a good pick. Let me go with. I don't know. I think I believe a little bit more in the opponent in this game maybe than the country does. So give me Florida State at Notre Dame.
Oh, that's a good one. Like, you're looking for Notre Dame games to take, right?
Yeah.
And if Notre Dame just plays kind of a weird schedule this year, that there are not a ton of holy moly Notre Dame games. We struggled with this a little bit when we were putting together our Ultimate Northern road trip and trying to be like, hey, we want to include Notre Dame, but we're not exactly sure what to do here. So I think this is a really good pick.
Yeah, it's Saturday, November 9th, in South Bend. I think Florida State, even retooling, has a chance to still be certainly among the best teams in the ACC. And like you said, it's just you're looking for potential stumbling spots for Notre Dame and what is a rather, I think, navigable schedule, and this is one of them. So, and again, good helmet game. I just think like a pretty compelling matchup. So I like this pick here.
All right, so that was pick 14.
14. Yeah.
Pick 15. I'm going to take one. I actually feel really good about this. And I have the ratings up in front of me, so I don't know if I'm cheating.
Oh, I do not have that in front of me.
Get to jump on you a little bit. I'm going to take the Black Friday game between Iowa and Nebraska. Nebraska at Iowa, November 29th on Black Friday. A year ago, the last week of the regular season, this was the 6th highest rated game. Ohio State, Michigan 1, Alabama, Auburn 2, Washington State, Washington 3. That was a banger. Mm-hmm. Georgia, Georgia Tech 4, Florida State, Florida 5, and then Iowa, Nebraska in this Black Friday window was 6. It was the highest rated game on that Friday. Outdrew Oregon State, Oregon on that Friday. Outdrew Missouri, Arkansas on that Friday. Outdrew Texas Tech, Texas on that Friday. Outdrew Penn State, Michigan State on that Friday. And if we think both these teams are good, absolute possible playoff implications for both teams. And if that happens, if they're both 9-2, this is probably too low for this game because I like the Black Friday window.
It's a great window. This is a good pick. This should have gone higher. And I was thinking about it when I made my Florida State Notre Dame pick, but even looking at like the way these picks have gone, maybe this game should have gone like 4 or 5 picks ago, because I do think it's gonna be a pretty well watched game. To me, it's pick 16.
Yes,
this is. I don't know that this will be a particularly good football game, to be honest, but it's pretty compelling because it is the dawn of a new era in a rather feisty rivalry. Michigan State at Michigan.
Oh, I like it. Yeah. I think that's right. And this could be low for this because this in the past has been a game that has drawn eyeballs. That's a good pick.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is October 26th, week 9. And who knows? Like maybe Michigan State will surprise and be a little better than we think they're going to be. But also I like Michigan. The gap in this game has been a little too wide for my liking the last couple of years. Even with that, there have actually been some closer games, but like last year was a total shellacking. I don't think this will be that. I think Michigan State will be more competitive. And even if it's slightly lopsided in Michigan's favor, it's still the first time we see Jonathan Smith against Sherrod Moore.
No, it's a good rivalry. I think people,
Yeah.
you can sell this. I think you're right. There's a way to sell this. 2 new coaches in a historic rivalry. Who will be the big brother now?
Yeah.
You can sell that. Let me ask you, do you think I can sell this at pick 17? Can I offer you a rematch of the national title game?
You can. I'll take it.
Any interest? Can we do that? Can we do Michigan at Washington on October 5th? Sometimes they won't do this anymore because ESPN's not involved. This is where I'm going to miss ESPN. It used to be when I was at Disney World and you're riding the Disney World buses, they have little placards in the bus, little signs of like what's coming up on ABC. It'd be Dancing with the Stars or whatever, but they'd have college football stuff up there. So I'm like, could I imagine national title? If you're at Disney World in late September, could you see Washington, Michigan, a placard on the bus, the national title game rematch? And they ignore the fact that maybe both teams have 2 losses by then. But yeah, I could see it, except the placards are gone. Now all the placards, now I can't even go. I'm not going to be able to ride buses at Disney World anymore because it's going to be all Alabama, Georgia. I'm going to have to ride. I'm going to have to wear my dog mentality hat around Disney World of like, dog mentality. Dog mentality at Disney now. Oh, yeah. Stupid ESPN.
I don't like that. Although I like Goofy's a dog. I like Goofy. Goofy's fine.
That's true. That's my kind of dog mentality. Oh, maybe I could get Goofy to wear a dog mentality shirt at Disney World to promote Kings of the North. So Michigan at Washington. It's funny to think, as we talked about, they're the 2 lowest teams in the Power 4 in terms of returning production, which is why a national championship game rematch just went 17th in the draft of best Northern TV games.
Yeah, and I think the number, not that the Oregon-Washington regular season game last year was like a bad number, but like the stakes were off the charts in that game, and like it didn't do a monstrous number. So it's like this game won't have much to it stakes-wise. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, these guys played in the national championship last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
But still worth picking, I think, at 17 for sure. I'm going to go back to the Nebraska I think, and take Nebraska at USC.
Yep. Just looking at that.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities. I'll just be very curious how they sell all these new historic matchups that are now just going to be part of Big Ten life. But Nebraska at USC, come on, man. That's something.
People will watch that. Yeah. Dylan Raiola against Lincoln Riley.
Moss. Yeah. I don't know. Miller Moss might win the Heisman. I don't know. It's like we can't be sitting here like making fun of USC's backup quarterback because he's not Caleb Williams. But
it is interesting that Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley are both like trying to do it this year without like a bona fide number 1 overall pick at quarterback. It's like there's a little bit of a pivot just for this one season, I think. But it is interesting.
Yeah, go back and watch our quarterback draft for the future. This is such a crazy year at quarterback in college football, particularly in the North. So, all right. So pick number 18, Nebraska at USC. I am down to my final pick. And do I want to make a statement here? I have a little noodle of an idea that I might want to do. And let me double check if there's anything else. Okay. I am going to take, I thought about the Holy War, but I'll leave that to you, possibly BYU at Utah on November 9th, if you want to take that. I'm going to take the worst soft open in the history of soft opens. And we had grand plans for this new world of the Big Ten. And they decided that the first Big Ten game played by a West Coast team as a member of the Big Ten will be Indiana at UCLA on September 14th. And that's the launching point. So I'll take it because it's the new world. This is it. They're not launching with Oregon. They're not launching with USC. They're not launching with a gigantic. We had a whole doubleheader planned, right? Do Ohio State at Oregon and Washington at Michigan or whatever. Or USC at Michigan, like as a doubleheader kind of whatever. Instead, this is it. This is the first one. So can anyone sell? Can we sell this? Curtis Rourke. Who's UCLA's quarterback this year?
It's a great question.
Ethan Garbers.
Ethan Garbers.
A new era. Kurt Signetti. Deshaun Foster. Welcome to the West Coast version of Big Ten football. No
Yeah.
offense.
Are they just going to show like old basketball highlights during this game?
I know. Bob Knight. John Wooden. Lou Alcindor.
Yeah. I don't know.
Isaiah Thomas. We can get, could you get Kareem and Isaiah Thomas on there on the sideline of the UCLA Indiana game? What are we doing? How is this? We already bemoaned this idea, but they blew it. They absolutely blew it with the launch of this. But this is it. So I'll take it 19th.
Okay. All right.
You're not sad. You weren't champing at the bit to get that one.
It wasn't. You know what? It wasn't on my list.
Okay.
So I'm happy to let you have it, but I think it's a point worth making. With my last pick, I was looking at the Holy War, but BYU is not going to be very good this year. First time since 2021 they're playing the game. It's a massive rivalry. I'm excited that it's back, but I don't know that it's a game that's going to do a huge number.
Is there another Utah game that you're considering right now at all?
Did I have another Utah game on my list? No.
I have a Utah game to throw out there as you consider this. Arizona at Utah on September 28th. Cam Rising, Noah Fafita, maybe the two best teams in the Big 12. Can they spin that? Can somebody spin that late September?
Yeah, you can spin that, I think. I'm going to pick this game will not do a massive number, but I can't wait to watch it. And it is another massive Big 12 game. Iowa State at West Virginia.
Oh, great.
October 12th, week 7.
Okay. I didn't even have that on my list. Wow, I missed that. Wow. That is a ball pick because we are all in on both those teams. And that's a ball pick. So I admire it. But that's a little bit of an uphill battle. They got to sell it though, man. And they got to get Gus and Joel to that game. Can that, do you think, what else is happening on October 12th is the problem? But Ohio State, Oregon's on October 12th.
Oregon. Yeah, and Penn State, USC.
Oh, yeah. So, uphill
hopefully we're not going head to head with either of those games. I just wanted to pick West Virginia's entire schedule, but I showed restraint and only picked 2 games. Because
the backyard brawl was on my list.
Me too.
To ponder. West Virginia at Pitt on September 14th. Can you spin that?
Yep.
In a certain way, I certainly think you.
Kansas comes to West Virginia. Kansas State comes to West Virginia. Every meaningful Big 12 game, aside from Colorado, Arizona, is being played in Morgantown.
Yeah, West Virginia season ticket holders are getting their money's worth this year. There's going to be good ball with stakes in Morgantown. I just don't know what the rest of the country's eyeballs will think about that. So maybe a little ambitious here, but that's the point we're at with these last games. There are a couple. I certainly think in the end, what's going to draw more eyeballs, West Virginia, Iowa State, or Michigan State, Ohio State. There's probably not a debate there. There's probably 3 more Ohio State games that we could have or should have picked. And there's a couple more interesting matchups. Wisconsin, USC didn't get picked. Penn State, USC didn't get picked. Penn State, Wisconsin, Washington, Penn State, Wisconsin, Nebraska. There's just a couple more of these sort of interesting, two good, interesting Big Ten opponents that didn't quite hit the threshold. But
probably, if I picked an Iowa State game here too, but if you're picking one, you should probably pick the Cy-Hawk game. We didn't pick that.
Right.
In week 2, there was one other one I wanted to mention. Which one was it? Louisville at Notre Dame too.
Yes.
I think could be a pretty.
Which actually I think drew a decent number last year. Again, when you're looking for Notre Dame, and that was a game that really mattered last year. It was a really good game, and Notre Dame. It was that was coming right after Notre Dame was on that crazy run of playing big time games against
Yeah, they
Ohio
played like
State and
4 like
Louisville and
top 20
Duke.
teams in a row, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so in the end, I think a worthwhile exercise. There's a lot of Ohio State. There's a decent amount of Colorado, but I do think. Do you think this new version with 4 Pac-12 schools joining the Big Ten? Do you think this is going to generate even more eyeballs? Will things sort of feed on themselves when you bring that West Coast audience, and maybe you create a world where all of a sudden people in like Ohio State, Michigan fans might watch Oregon, Washington, right? Which like we didn't pick.
Yeah.
Or Oregon fans might watch Penn State, Wisconsin. I'll be very curious the melding of the best of the Pac-12 with the history of the Big Ten and the coast to coast reach now. I do think there's a chance there's a multiplying effect on ratings here that I don't know. Not in Los Angeles, I guess. I don't know if anyone in LA is going to be like, oh, Penn State, Wisconsin this week. Let's go. Because they're just going to be at the beach. But I think West Coast football fans might start watching Big Ten games.
I think they will. And I also think too, like, no offense to like the Illinois of the world, but like I think, more Big Ten fans, like, OG Big Ten fans are going to want to watch like Wisconsin against USC than Wisconsin against Illinois, right? And maybe that novelty will wear off after a couple of years, but for this first year, especially, it's like, oh man, USC's playing Nebraska. Yeah, I'm going to watch that.
Yeah. All right. Final top 20. Michigan, Ohio State 1, Ohio State, Oregon 2, Texas, Michigan 3, Ohio State, Penn State 4. Colorado, Nebraska 5, Bama, Wisconsin 6, Oregon, Michigan 7, Nebraska, Ohio State 8, USC, Michigan 9, Notre Dame, USC 10. Number 11, Iowa, Ohio State 12, Penn State, West Virginia 13, Utah, Colorado 14, Florida State, Notre Dame 15, Nebraska, Iowa 16, Michigan State, Michigan 17, Michigan, Washington 18, Nebraska, USC 19, Indiana, UCLA 20, Iowa State, West Virginia. Obviously, there's like a handful, 5 teams or so that dominate. That's why the sport is where it is. That's why if you're not one of those teams, your status might be a little tenuous when it comes to your place in college football. But I also think the sport's pretty healthy when you look at some of the ratings for last year. Is college football the number 2 sport in America?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. And so it's one of those things where when that's the case, it's hard for me to get too angst-ridden about the future of the sport, because it certainly hasn't been the number 2 sport in America always.
Yeah.
But
right.
I think that's where it is now because people love football. Okay. We have some stuff planned. We have a national championship or bust conversation on the horizon. We have college football getting better or worse as a conversation on the horizon. We have best top 4s in the North, your quarterback and your best 3 skill guys. That's on the horizon. We have trend lines, who's trending up, who's trending down in the North. That's on the horizon. We have sister schools. Who is the Southern school that we would pair with various Northern schools, kind of like sister cities? When you find out that Ann Arbor, Michigan is sister cities with Sofia, Bulgaria, and you're like, what? So we're going to do that.
Is that true, or you just pull that out of thin air?
I'm just pulling that out. I mean, if that's actually true, well, now I have to look. Now I'll look at all the college towns in the North and see what their real sister cities are. But we have sister schools coming up, and we just have a lot of interesting conversation around Northern college football, plus a couple little special projects that we hope to start launching and dropping in here and there. For now, thanks as always to our great producer, Mike Yorostowski, for making us look good and sound good. And I do want to show off my Jonas Brothers shirt because it's their faces. And I was walking in to somewhere this morning before we recorded. I'm wearing my Jonas Brothers shirt, and there were some little kids coming out. And I thought to myself, I wonder if these little kids are going to think I'm hip because I'm wearing a Jonas Brothers shirt. And then as we discussed, I was like, oh, the Jonas Brothers are 40. I'm not like little kids That 50-year-old man is so cool because he's wearing a Jonas Brothers shirt is not a conversation that is taking place anywhere in America, regardless of age.
Maybe they did think you were cool. They're not quite 40. I think Nick Jonas is like 30.
Yeah. Yankee Stadium, man, was a banger of a show. Anyway, thanks as always to you guys for making Kings of the North part of your week. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.